Just say the key in the beginning, and then we'll make a progression out of that key, but at least we know any note we play is going to sound all right. That also might be me with not being able to hear pitches.
Yeah, you just need to do some ear training.
Yeah, I could, but...
Just play 1 or 2 wrong notes and triangulate the key.
I tend to do that, except then I get distracted because I like playing a lot of notes.
I don't necessarily know what chords go with a certain key or anything like that, but I do know it has taken me so long to figure out an easy way to figure out what notes are consonant or dissonant to whatever key you're in, which then I'm like, okay, which one's the next one? Do we want it to be more agreeable? Do we want it to be not agreeable? To what degree do we want this to be, to be as agreeable or not so agreeable? And, what kind of flair can we throw in there that would add a little bit of texture to this, or, add a little more, I guess, layer to it, I guess, to use the Shrek analogy, like we got to throw more layers into
like
the music.
Onions. I just get so pattern based off, I know what my scales are, which really messes me up because then I can't hear the music. I can feel it. I just can't hear it.
Well, as long as you can feel all the music together, then I think you're set.
Yeah, that's fair.
I can also, I can't name you a chord if you play it, but particularly if it's just 2 notes, I can tell you, okay, that's, if you play a G and a B, I can tell you, okay, that's a major third. If you play an E and an A sharp, okay, that's a tritone chord. Or if you just play an octave, it's an E and a higher E. It's okay, you can hear it. They sound exactly the same. They just sound a certain way. Or a fifth, or if you have one of those chords, it just adds a lot of filth. What is it? It's the root, the fourth, and the octave of the root. Dude, those are so filthy. They sound so good. I can tell what it is on the guitar if I hear it, but I can't tell you okay, that's a G or that's a B or that's an A, an A sharp. I can't tell you.
Yeah, I just can't hear the difference. If you play a note and another note, I have no idea what to tell you what the interval of them are, or even what note you're playing or anything. But if you give me about 3 minutes of playing with you, I can do it. Or if you just tell me what key you're in, then I can normally work around the key. And if you tell me we're in A minor, I can do that. If you tell me we're in A Phrygian, I can do that. But if you just start playing, I cannot work that out. I like my patterns.
See, I wish I knew patterns better. I probably know a few and just don't know it.
You definitely know them, but just don't know what they are.
Power chord.
Yeah, that's my problem, is I just never took the time to sit down and study music theory that much. But I know some. I don't want to just put him on the spot here, but Connor knows music theory as if he wrote it, at least in my opinion. I mean, he knows it the back of his hand, but I feel that I know some aspects of it that just because I've used them or been around them and I've discussed them with him, and he's been able to whatever's lost in translation, he's been able to translate to me. But aside from that, I'm kind of lost and useless in a way, because I played a lot of metal music, a lot of rock music. I know a lot of the dissonant intervals or the intervals that are agreeable that sound good and sound cool together. I noticed that my favorite guitar players always use a lot of just taking the root note and just going around the intervals that they use. Thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, and octaves. That's what most of them use. And only that. But then when they start throwing in other things, I'm okay, what is this? But that gets me lost. Now, if I go listen to something else and they're playing something you take something I don't know, some death metal versus Maroon 5. They're two completely different animals. One sounds very happy. He's using a lot of major chords. The other one is using almost exclusively minors. Very sad, very depressing, very aggressive. The other one is very happy, but they sound lovely. But I don't know how in the world to translate the music, but I love the way it sounds with Maroon 5. But I don't know how to translate it on the guitar. I have absolutely no clue how to do it. Now, if you get me to listen to some metal, I can translate it onto the guitar after listening to it for a minute or two. I can figure it out just because I'm familiar with it. But I think that there's more familiarity than anything and just repetitiveness.
Definitely. I'm glad you specifically said translate when talking about music theory, because everyone, especially people who don't know music theory and are intimidated to learn about it, what everyone needs to remember is that music theory is a language. It is purely descriptive. It's just words to explain what's happening when you hear these things. Like you hear dissonance, you hear all these cool things going on in thrash metal. If you know music theory, you can say that's a tritone, that's a minor second, and it works because there's this sort of mathematical relationship that makes these way more complicated than a lot of other intervals, and that sounds chaotic. It puts you on edge. It's anxiety inducing. That's the theory element. But when people say music theory, all they mean is the word for these sorts of things and how to calculate any way to achieve that same effect in whatever key, whatever tuning. Knowing these theories in terms of language versus in terms of patterns versus in terms of hearing and experimenting, it's all the same thing. Just some people can talk about it, some people can play it.
Well, and what I'm going to throw in is, yeah, it's a language. The English language has so many exceptions to everything. You learn the language, but don't take the language to heart as the facts of the matter. Learn it just so you got a general baseline of what you know we're talking about, but you can go outside of it anytime you want. I was a hardcore anti-music theory dude until I switched to bass. I'm like, oh, this shit's actually really fun to learn. And I just started studying the different scales and different things like that and the intervals and stuff. But no, then there's certain jam sessions where I have to fully forget everything I know about music theory. Like when I'm playing with Aegis, music theory goes out the window in my head. When I'm playing with Jordan and Ethan or something, we're hardcore on like what our scale is, what we're playing. But as someone who's played in a couple of different bands in the local scene, there's specific, like with different bands, I've learned different ways to think about the music. When I was playing with Hemlock Theory with Billy O'Brien, I knew if he gave me the chords, I can make the song work. Because that's how Billy works with his music. When I played with Ty for a sec, it was a whole different, like, I learned what Ty's scale was. And it transitioned throughout all the songs. When I'm playing with Impulse Machine, I'm never thinking about a scale in any capacity for any reason. Because they're just going to be goofy songs. And that's why it's way easier for me to remember. Because they're very specific songs. With Hermes Mora, I've learned it's generally a sharp minor, except it does a lot of dissonant notes.
The A sharp minor thrash scale.
Dun, 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 dun.
Now, I'm going to push back on you saying you ever forget music theory or throw it out the window.
With Impulse?
Well, with anything. Because anytime you're thinking about what you're playing, you are having a music theory. The Ty scale, that is a theory about music that Ty uses that you notice.
Yeah, with the Ty scale. The reason I said Impulse Machine is I think...
Well, you said Pithy Daco.
Oh, I forgot I also play Pithy Daco.
They've got different music theories. Mm-hmm. It's a whole set of theories that all relate to different parts of music.
And that's why you have to change it when you're playing with different people. You can't expect everybody to have the same theory you do.
Like when people say music theory, especially in a derogative sense, what they mean is the specific language that Western art music has used, especially in the last 400 years. Mm-hmm. And that is very limiting when talking about pop music, especially when talking about the limits of like pop in the broad sense, popular music, including death metal. The fact that there is no Latin word for like a high scream versus a low scream or different kinds of distortion, that reflects how the language of Western art music is not built to adequately describe death metal. Music theory is descriptive. It is never prescriptive. It can never tell you what to do. It can only describe what things are done and how things work, why things are done.
Music theory does not help me when trying to learn any of Josh's riffs in Catacombs.
Yeah.
I'm just freeballing.
It's like I have studied Western art music theory enough that I am, let's say, fluent in the language, not like the most fluent. I am not Jacob Collier, but I can use that to describe Josh's riffs. That's partially because I play piano. I'm biased. The Western art music it's the language of the piano. Like Josh, he's playing really cool chords that there are actually Western art music explanations for why they work and how they achieve the right effects. But it's not the best way to talk about it. And that's why I don't really talk about it that way. I think of it that way because it helps me, because that is my native tongue. But Josh's native tongue, Zach's native tongue is patterns. And it's more helpful to think of things in terms of the patterns on the instrument, and especially guitar. All guitars, including bass guitars, they're built on patterns rather than linear expressions of a musical vocabulary.
And that's why with Billy, I would ask what's the key of the song. With Josh, I ask him what tuning he's in, because then I can follow his pattern.
You mentioning, Connor, that it is descriptive rather than prescriptive is perfect, because like I can describe to you the way something sounds and maybe possibly why it sounds this way, but I can't tell you like why. I'm just pulling this example out because this first thing comes to my mind. If you're playing like an F sharp chord and you're playing a lead just along this droning F sharp sound, I can't tell you why a bend starting from an F, which is the half step back, going up to the F sharp, then up to the G, and then coming back down to an F sharp sounds interesting. You got to make that up for yourself to a degree. You can't, because you're going from a dissonant note to a consonant note to another dissonant note back to a consonant. And then you're going along these notes to wherever you land at the end of the solo. Whether you're purposely hitting right notes or wrong notes, I can't tell you why that sounds good. But if it sounds good to one's ear, then that is up to you to come up with that on why it sounds good. It's descriptive rather than prescriptive, like you say.
It's the musical equivalent of saying all y'all.
All y'all.
Grammatically does not really make sense, but hearing it makes sense. And then it's your burden, if you really want to break it down that hard, to explain to me why I accept all y'all as a phrase. Because if your linguistics don't match it, then your whole system doesn't work.
Exactly. Grammar, the same way. This is why grammar Nazis are just like incel nerds. Grammar is descriptive, not prescriptive. People make up grammar. It was invented. It changes. Words change.
I ain't never have done did it. Yeah, the person just said they didn't do it. Versus if you say, I didn't not do it, that means you did it.
The Appalachian dialect of the English language has a lot of influence from all sorts of dialects where this double negative does not create a positive. It's an emphasis. They stack. If you're speaking the sort of English that was spoken by grammarians when they wrote it down, yeah, double negative makes a positive. If you're speaking a lot of other languages, it does not. Language is not math. You can't math it like that. Language is feelings. A good grammarian is going to hear what you say and be able to explain why it works. Just like Michael's example, the key of F sharp, bend from F up to G, back down, depending on the context of the song. I feel like I could explain why it works because it's a pretty straightforward application of tension, dissonance, like microtonality, blending into a moment of consonance and then back to a different sort of dissonance. And this is a very common thing in metal. Metal relies a lot on careful application of tension, microtonality, and like bends. That is a well-established thing that Western art music can't explain very well because it's built around the piano.
Can't do the bend.
And we're making a lot of strides in this. There's a lot of attempts to adapt the vocabulary that we got from Western art music theory, the things we can reuse, like key, like time signature, and we're introducing new ideas for the things that distorted electric guitars do, the things that clean versus harsh vocals do. We've got a fuck ton of language about clean singing in opera, all sorts of Italian words, but very limited way to describe screamed vocals until pretty recently.
Dad asked me, because he was like, the vocals on the song where Connor screams. Well, that sounds too harsh. Is there like a real word for like what that vocality is or vocalization is? I'm like, well, you could say like he's doing a false chord, he's doing harsh vocals if you want to go more broad, or he's doing a guttural, and gave like the bass lines of like what different screams are called. And he was like, oh, okay, cool. And he was happy to hear like there's terms for the different forms of screaming. as a thing to say other than just he's screaming. And he did like the term harsh vocals as a baseline thing, which is a much more recent terminology, and also false chord, gutturals.
False chord, fry.
Yeah, fry is the one I
couldn't.
couldn't think of in the moment, but yeah.
I think it's very cool that we're starting to expand on this because we are able to think about things differently if we have new words for things, especially if you think about like prepositions in different languages. But in this context, what I'm referring to is the fact that it's easier to learn to appreciate something if you understand the sorts of nuance going on, and if you can learn about the words that are used to communicate that nuance. You learn different things to listen for.